Well, the last few days, I think we have determined that winter is definitely here finally. The colder temperatures this week and the snow had me longing to be somewhere with temperatures that were higher and with some sunshine. So a week of vacation sounds like a really great idea to me right now. I don't know about you, but I don't do temperature drops real well. So the question in our house became, well, where would we go? Trips just don't magically happen, though. They require planning and preparation. Where could we go that would be warm? But to get to warm temperatures, we wouldn't want to drive because we might get caught in a snowstorm, which seemed kind of possible yesterday. And so we decided to fly. But the last time we flew, it was pre-COVID, and our suitcases were damaged, at least one of them to the point where the wheels didn't work. So, by the time you decide where you want to go and get flights, then you start figuring, oh, well, we need to get suitcases, so we get on Black Friday sales to look for luggage, and what appointments do we need to reschedule while we're gone, and what did we forget that we haven't even thought about yet, and what else do we need to get? So the list goes on, because preparations are a necessary part of a journey. If you don't prepare, you're not going to get there. The longing on what we'll experience at the destination, though, creates hope for what we want to find. And in this case, it's sunshine and warm temperatures, but that's true in any scenario. So looking forward to what we're going to experience on the journey is part of the fun. What will we see? What experience will we have? What will we get to do? And we know that we won't come home the same that we left, although probably when you go somewhere warm, you get off the plane, will be really freezing. But we're going to bring memories back home with us. Some journeys can even change our lives. Maybe you can remember one that changed yours. It's no wonder that the word journey is used as a metaphor for the spiritual life. We read about them throughout the Bible. You might remember God called Abraham to leave his home and go to a place that God would show him. He didn't even know where he was heading. Hard to prepare. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt into the wilderness where they journeyed for 40 years. Obviously didn't have a good roadmap because they went around and around. The Apostle Paul journeyed throughout the Mediterranean area, starting churches and spreading the good news of Jesus Christ. In his lifetime and on his mission trips, we're told that he traveled roughly 10,000 miles. Now, part of that was on ships, so he didn't walk at all, but he did do a lot of traveling. His journey took the church beyond the boundaries of Judaism and brought hope to people of various nations, races, and languages. Now, many of us associate the Christmas season with traveling. We go to visit relatives and friends. But have you ever thought of Christmas itself as a journey? Advent is the first season of the Christian year, so happy birthday to you all, or Happy New Year to you all today. It's the beginning of another church year. We begin the Christian year with themes like preparation, preparing for the journey, getting ready, longing, and waiting, almost as if we're going on a trip. The difference is that we aren't trying to get to a destination. We find the meaning of Christmas along the journey. As the old saying goes, the journey is the destination. This is the way of Christmas. In worship, we'll be exploring the spiritual meaning of important locations in the Christmas story throughout the Advent season. And our first stop is in Rome, the center of the empire that wrapped around the Mediterranean Sea. In 63 BC, the Roman Empire came to rule over Israel after General Pompey captured Jerusalem. A strong military presence was there to ensure compliance with the demands that were being placed on them. Now, Rome ruled through what they call client kings. They were individuals with some authority who vowed allegiance to Rome. This gave the appearance that Rome's presence was welcomed in the area, But in reality, client kings were considered traitors by the people that lived there, because many of them abused their power, such as the Herods. Herod the Great was the first member of his family to be given the title of king. He had been born Jewish. However, Herod spent much of his early life living among Gentiles and made some alliances with those in power. Herod stopped at nothing to eliminate potential threats. He went so far as to execute his wife, his in-laws, and 3 of his sons, all because he thought they would take over his throne. There were good things about Roman rule, though. The creation of aqueducts and sewers reduced disease. The military presence reduced crime. The highways that were built created a faster connection between the cities and the empire. And all the construction created jobs and stimulated the economy. But not everything was good. Compliance with Roman laws was required, and those who broke the law were punished publicly to serve as a warning to others. Rome also ignored the injustice of the leaders, kind of like Herod and all of his done, and the list goes on and on of the issues. So the news that a decree had been made calling for a census was met with skepticism by the Jews. They would have wondered if it was all meant to lead to higher taxes, or possibly even more. Rome was not to be trusted. What represents Rome for you? Rome is the place where decisions are made that impact your life that are beyond your control. Things such as your healthcare coverage, access to public services, the condition of your neighborhood, and the list goes on and on. Some of us live in Rome. We're in positions where we get to make decisions that affect people far from us, and we need to keep their needs in mind. Rome reminds us of the reality that the Israelites lived in. They lived under an occupying force that was beyond their control. They longed for something more. They longed for freedom. They longed for justice. They longed for peace. They felt like changing things was impossible. All that they could do was long for something better. The journey of Advent begins in longing. Not little longings like we might do with a New Year's resolution, like to lose 10 pounds or to eat better. The longings of Advent are deeper and spiritual. What longings do you bring to Advent? Maybe it's to fill a void that's caused by loneliness, a safe place to live, to be reunited with a loved one. What longing do you bring to Advent? The other side of that question is, what does God long for our world? This question can change our lives. When our heart breaks over the things that break God's heart, God may call us to be the solution to the problem. Maybe it's gun violence, adequate health care, education equity, climate change. I'm sure you can think of a long list of things that it could possibly be, but which one of it is it that speaks to you? Well, whatever it is that comes to you, it may seem overwhelming and beyond your control to change. But God doesn't reveal his will without making a way. God doesn't show his servants how they will change the world. God simply gives them a vision of a changed world and then promises them that God will be with them as they attempt to do it. Most of the radical revolutions in history have started with the troubled spirit of an individual or individuals who long for a better world. People who feel inadequate to change what it is that's troubling them. The two most important ingredients for change are courage and trust. We have to have courage to allow God to trouble us. We must have courage to believe that the purpose of faith is not just to comfort the afflicted, but to afflict the comfortable. Then we must trust that God empowers us and works through our faithful actions. What feeds that kind of courage and trust? An unchangeable faith in God's active work in the world. An unchangeable faith in God's active work in the world. Well, let's go back to the Christmas story and the journey that started in Rome. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. Now we have to remember that this was a time that was way before modern technology, where you could put something on the internet or make a telephone call or whatever. Back then, it could take months, if not a year or more, for the decision to be carried 1,000 miles to Palestine, for example. This means that Caesar Augustus could have issued the decree about the census months before the angel visited Mary in Nazareth. So this could have been the very beginning of the story, even before the angel came to Mary. So if this was the case, then the journey of Christmas starts with God acting through worldly political events, all for the purpose of allowing Jesus to be born in a manger in Bethlehem. That means what happened in Bethlehem really started in Rome. What does it mean for you to begin your journey to Christmas in Rome? It leads us to two questions. Where do you see hints of God's work in the world? Where do you not see God moving, but choose to believe that in those places there are hints of God's presence? Well, those two questions show the difference between faith and conviction. So the first question, where do you see hints of God's work in the world? So when we see hints of God's work in the world and say that the signs give us faith, they don't really. They give us conviction, confirmation of our trust in God. It's when we can't see God moving, which is the second question. When we can't see God moving, that's when we're required to have faith. We could say that it challenges our faith. So Rob Pouquet, in the book we're using, On the Way to Bethlehem, shares an example of God working before we are ever aware that I really liked, and I want to share with you. So Rob Pouquet writes, I have a friend in Indianapolis, Glenn McDonald, who was a retired Presbyterian pastor. He writes a daily email devotion that goes to more than 100,000 people. That's a lot of people wanting to read what you write. In a recent reflection, he told a story about the dean of Gordon Conwell Seminary in 1975, William Kerr. He was in his office praying one day when he was interrupted by a student, Mike Ford. The student asked what he was praying for. The president explained that there was a distinguished British scholar, Andrew Lincoln, they were trying to get on the faculty. The president knew this person could have great impact on many students, but the government wouldn't grant a work visa. The student said, I might be able to help with that. You see, the student's father was Gerald Ford, who had just become president of the United States. Within a short time, the red tape disappeared, and Andrew Lincoln was teaching at the seminary. A young student who came under Lincoln's influence was Tim Keller, the founding pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. He was hugely inspired by this person. Just over a decade after leaving seminary, Keller started Redeemer, and at his death in 2023, had started over 750 communities of faith around the world. His leadership and his writings have made huge impressions on Christians around the world, and Fuquay says, including me. And if you haven't read anything by him, he's got some really good ones out there. He continues, but retrace the steps of what brought Tim Keller under the influence of this professor. The Watergate scandal in the early 1970s was a low point in American politics. The nation was divided unlike any time since the Civil War. President Nixon resigned. As a result, the person Nixon had appointed to be his vice president, Gerald Ford, became president of the country. His son, who was a student in seminary at the time, just happened to come in the dean's office while he was praying. In a time of turmoil, when God seemed absent, events unfolded which God used to further God's purpose. Awful lot of coincidences in that story, aren't there? It just happened he walked in at the right moment. And if you pay attention, you'll see those in your own lives as well. So Rome is not the easiest place to have faith. If we let it, Rome can destroy our faith in God. But recognizing Rome prevents a Christmas story from being turned into a warm fuzzy and helps us recognize that real challenges exist in our world. When we begin the Christmas story in Rome, it means that God is in control of what happens in Rome as much as what happened in the manger. It means that God reigns over presidents and prime ministers, legislators and jailers. Fuquay says, no one on earth would have looked at a decree from Caesar Augustus and immediately thought, God's up to something. But I imagine the angels in heaven were saying, get ready. You know, we may not always see it, but God is always and already at work. When we acknowledge our deepest longings, we open ourselves to the possibility of God showing up and telling us, I'm already here and working. There's reason for hope. Let us pray. Empires rise and fall, but your good purposes remain. As you called your saints in the past to challenge the powers of this world with the power of your justice and love, so you call us. We know that we cannot change this world on our own. We also know that we cannot change it without you. In Jesus Christ,